had the time of my life. No one's ever felt this way before. Whoa, ho, hey, sorry. Recording. Oh, mic's on. All right. The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Radar Radio Star, Dragonaut 1. Woo! There's a new one for you. Is here for your, well, it was supposed to be a Wednesday Q&A, ended up coming out on a Thursday again. Just had a very, very funny schedule due to, a very funny schedule that I've had. So, but been doing a lot of work on, getting more than, well, it's not just me, but getting more than me, being a part of the Zomia ONE network. So, that's required me to do some traveling and a lot of other things. It's been really crazy, but a ton of fun. So anyway, April is still going to be a crazy month. There is a lot of content to come out, a lot of great stuff to really get into. In fact, just to speak of a couple things, of course, the Zomia ONE Underground Q&A now, it's not just about Sovereign Tech, right? I mean, Sovereign Tech is the flagship show of Zomia ONE, but now this is also about the Hard and Fast podcast, which already have a couple episodes of that out. There's going to be a lot more, but very, very pleased with the response that I've gotten from that so far. Again, that is a show where I already have, there's interviews, there's going to be reviews of live events. All kinds of things. In fact, I might even start recording from the live events as they happen, and so all of that's going to be really, really interesting. I'm so excited for this show because I feel like that one in particular is a space that there isn't a whole lot of shows out there. And the ones that I've actually checked out, besides Eddie Trunk, that talk about that genre of music, I'm not impressed, at all. And I think, we have really something special to deliver. And again, the ultimate aim of that, a lot of that, is to get people into the rest of the stuff on Zomia ONE and ultimately, maybe get people's minds a-changing, if you know what I mean, and towards stuff that we will be talking about later in this Q&A. In fact, got a huge subject to get into later on in the Q&A that I was debating on talking about on a Prime episode. I might end up talking about it here, and then in the near future, Prime episode, there I go saying that. In the future, I might end up putting it on an actual tacking it on to a Sovereign Tech show, just because, it's one of those conversations that I think is important, but I want to get into it here where I have the space and time to do so. Like space and time are somehow separate things, but no, they're not. So anyway, a couple shows you're also going to really want to listen to, especially this month, April 2019. The Star Trek update should be coming out this Friday. So I guess that's tomorrow. Would that be April 19th? You're going to want to hear that because there's going to be the season 2 Discovery wrap up, which I'm sure is going to be interesting. Rob and I will be doing that, and that's always a ton of fun. And then also Rob and I will be doing the, did I say Star Trek update? See, I still got to get used to all these new show names. In fact, we're renaming Game Talk as well to the Gaming Grid. So that's something to look out for as well. Eventually I'll go back and rename all of the episodes, previous episodes of Game Talk. Fortunately, there aren't that many yet. But I'll rename them to Gaming Grid as well. So I have to make that happen. Anyway, but you're going to want to listen to Sovereign Trek, right? That's the Star Trek show that we do on Zomia ONE. And then you're going to want to listen to TIE Fighter Renegades this month because, man, the news that came out of Celebration, did I watch the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker? You bet your fucking ass I did. It's not a spoiler, but if you didn't watch the live stream where, I'm sure they have the replay of it or someone does, where Ian McDiarmid came out, who plays the Emperor and does the voice for the Emperor historically. Sam Witwer does the voice for the Emperor too and does a phenomenal job, and what a sexy man he is. But anyway, Ian McDiarmid came out at the end of the trailer and just like, roll it again. Oh man, that was so fucking great. So a lot of great stuff to talk about on all of those. So you're definitely going to want to be listening into the other shows that are on Zomia ONE this month, because a lot of exciting things happening there. Now, speaking of Zomia ONE host, and I think that's the best way to put him, Speaking of Zomia One host Robin Freebeard, he had some comments. So why don't we get into our Q&A here? We got three things we're going to get into, and then a pretty good album of the week to talk about. But he had some comments from episode 323, and I fucked up the numbering. God damn it! I put 324 when it's actually 323. Hopefully that'll update when I post this show. But anyway, so. Yeah, so this was the episode that was Amazon Space Stations, right? Which was kind of the naming of the episode was a sequel of sorts to episode 322, which was Amazon Space Internet. And we talked about really Elon Musk's and Jeff Bezos's plans for, what humanity is going to be like when it goes into space, or how, is it going to be on Mars? Is it going to be on space habitat, in self-sufficient space habitats, whatever. And well, anyway, you can listen to the episode. The episode's very new, very fresh, came out a little late this week. But anyway, Robin had some great points to bring up on it, and he commented on the show. Look, folks, you can comment right on, there's a couple ways you can do this. If you're using the Podbean app, okay, and you're subscribed to Zomia One, you can comment right in the Podbean app, right there, and it works great. Okay, and you can even thumb up. It has very much a kind of a social media flavor to it. A little bit. It works more really like website comments than it does social media, but it's there. The other way you can do it is actually from the website. If you go to ZomiaOne.com, you can comment and reply and favorite or like or whatever you want to call it. Comments on specific episodes. You can do that. So, take advantage of that, because I am totally going to pull and read from that. Back when we were on Patreon more, I was able to, we were able to do the same thing, which was really cool. It's limited. Understand that basically I have put everything onto Podbean, just because Podbean is not cheap. Running this network is not the cheapest thing. Okay. And B, so to make that, shall we say, financially feasible, I, shut down just about everything else to where everything ends up on Podbean. Now, if there's ever a problem with Podbean, the way I'm going to do things after that, I've said this before. We're going to get into Robin's comments. But I've said this before. If something happens with Podbean, I am going to completely just shift over to self-hosting of everything. Okay, I'm just going to self-host it all, and I will, I'll deal with that. This is the last ditch where I am going to, count on any kind of third party. I already have some systems in place to where I could self-host. I could self-host mail, the website, as well as obviously the podcast and any other extraneous materials. Okay, so if I have to do that, I will. I am very thankful that, due to my experience in my life, pretty much, that I have the knowledge to be able to do that. Okay. But if things really do get bad, because look, I agree. You don't always want to put all your eggs in one basket, and I don't really have all my eggs in one basket. Like some of the other things I do, like my games or Audio of the Ancients, those are hosted on other sites. But bottom line, if, something happens with Podbean, there's nowhere else I'm going to turn. I am just going to self-host everything. All right. So anyway, if you're worried about that, or if you have some kind of criticisms, like, oh, you shouldn't be counting everything on Podbean, don't worry. If things get bad with Podbean somehow, there are already alternatives ready to go, and I already know the direction that I'm going to take. So anyway, let's read the comments here. And again, if you want to reply to Robin, he's a great conversationalist, I'll tell you that, and a brilliant guy. You can on the actual sound for episode 323 of Sovereign Tech. So here we go. This is Robin saying, Bezos is right about needing to get industry into space, but it has nothing to do with protecting the environment on Earth. It's a matter of pure logistics in that it will be cheaper and easier in the long run to produce things in space than making them down here and sending them up with a rocket. Stanley breaking in for a second on that. Yeah, right. And that's like Bezos was arguing, he was making an environmental case saying, let's do heavy industry out in space. We don't need to do it on Earth. Let's keep Earth pristine. Let's keep it beautiful. Let's make Earth a resort planet. And we do a lot of the heavy lifting, or the heavy industry, as he would put it, out in the rest of the solar system. And Robin's like, yeah, no, that's exactly what you should do, but you do that because it's cheaper, to do it that way, as compared to, doing it all on Earth. And ultimately, and I know Robin would know this, ultimately, yes, like it would be cheaper. It's going to be expensive at first to create the infrastructure throughout the solar system to do it. But then in the end, it will be cheaper to do it, out in space. So I do agree with that. And I agree. I imagine actually also Bezos probably knows that. And he's just he's appealing to emotion, with the environmentalist case for why to do that. But ultimately, I'm sure he recognizes that, no, this is just going to be the cheaper way to do business. So anyway, reading on. But I don't see how asteroids are more hospitable than Mount Everest. It's all about gravity wells and access to water. No space colony is going to be self-sufficient without water. The thing that worries me about Bezos' vision is that it does sound nice, but you only have to look at the way he has treated his labor force in the past to see what he has in mind for his space colonists. I don't care if he's treating them better now. All that matters is what he thought he could get away with in the past. So I think he's just priming people on a dream of living in space in order to exploit that future workforce. Fuck him and Musk. Woo! Fighting words. And not unfair. Historically, Amazon was horrible to their employees. And in fact, even when they did the whole, all right, every employee is going to make $15 an hour, that came at a cost. That came at a cost of like bonuses no longer being a thing. A lot of different reward systems for exceptional employees went away because of that. And so, him treating people better now, even that is somewhat obviously up to debate, but, one could say at face value, it does appear that he is. So Robin is absolutely right for calling this out, that, how's Bezos going to treat all these, heavy industry workers in space, right? And even if Bezos is treating them, again, even if he's treating them better now, what's the reality behind that? There's an interesting, what do they call it? So Jack Ma, is it Jack Ma? Is that the guy who's the head of Alibaba? Where that's kind of the Amazon of China, right? So he's sort of the Chinese corollary to Jeff Bezos. It's funny. He was giving a very utopian vision of the future, saying, eventually Alibaba employees will make plenty of money, but they'll only be working like 4 hours a week. And this is so many years ago that he said that, not too many years ago, a couple, maybe 2, 3, 4. And then just recently, and he's taken proper heat for this, he's pushing for, what is it called, a 699 or a 996? I forget which direction that goes, that those numbers go, but it's the same meaning. Where he's arguing now, no, that Alibaba employees need to work 6 days a week, and they need to work from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. He's talking about doing 12-hour days, and it's 996. And which is hilarious, because this is the same guy who basically says, I don't come into this world to work. I come in this world to enjoy my life, and I want to die on the beaches. But I guess it's not true for Alibaba employees, right? Who he wants to, again, have them working 6 days a week, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. So now what happened there? What happened to, my employees are only going to be working 4 hours a week and making a killing, to, no, they need to work, they need to do the 996. What happened is that Alibaba's like stocks were in trouble. They weren't making as much money or something like that. And I think that a lot of Bezos's, like the $15 an hour, a lot of these other things were probably only possible because Amazon started turning a profit. Before Amazon was turning a profit, he had to make labor look as inexpensive as possible to keep investors happy, right? So, now he can engage in that stuff. But if it ever, if the purse has to get tightened, it's not going to get tightened on Bezos. It's going to get tightened on Amazon and the Amazon workforce. And just like what's, I think, is happening with, with Alibaba, same thing. So yeah, that's scary, and it's worth bringing up and, worth talking about, that, well, wait a minute. Okay, he has these grand visions for what the future is going to be like. But, how is the workforce going to be treated that's going to bring this into reality? We're talking about the neo railroad crews, really the railroad crews of the 21st century in a very real way. And, there's interesting things to learn about when you read about that sort of, what that workforce had to go through and so on. So anyway, I don't trust Bezos and I don't trust Musk. And so for, Robin to end off with fuck him and Musk, I totally agree with you. As far as, the water argument and things like this and gravity wells, living in 0G and all that, these are very real concerns to have. I think that's why some people would, why Musk probably is a lot more interested in Mars, because there you don't have to worry about, how do you create artificial gravity? How do you do this and that? And, Gerard O'Neill, who Bezos was quoting, does have some concepts, for how to achieve artificial gravity. But who knows if any of that shit's going to actually work. Again, I feel like both Bezos and Musk side-skirted one of the real winners here, which is Venus. Again, if we got to get humanity, because one of the arguments for making humanity a multi-planet species, and Carl Sagan would make this argument, lots of people would make this argument, is that, again, if something happens like a virus, if some kind of sickness happens on Earth that ends up a plague that wipes out humanity again, you think like the Black Plague, which almost did, or came very close, or you think about cataclysmic events like the Toba supervolcano and others, where humanity gets whittled down to practically nothing, and maybe this time it will get whittled down to nothing. You got to have, or you don't have to. Okay, well, let me finish my thought. You'll want, not you gotta, you'll want a place where humanity is thriving somewhere else. And I think Venus is the very obvious answer. Also, asteroids, to get to that, granted, Bezos is talking about, he's really talking about like where it's space stations, that people are living on basically. I was the one talking about asteroids. Like on Ceres and some other asteroids, there probably is some water. So water's a possibility for some of that. But anyway, that's getting into a whole other thing. But Robin's points are right on. But the point I was going to make is that I suppose I need to explain a couple things. All right. First off, why do I say, because I've said this many times, that humanity is meant to be a multiplanetary species? I will explain that. Now, that's not, I say that and I agree with that. I'm not the first person to say that. That is not exactly my quote. That quote actually comes from one of the directors of NASA, and that's exactly how he says it. We are meant to be a multiplanetary species. Now, I don't know exactly why he thinks that. I know why I think that. And that's because there are some of us, probably a fair amount of us, in the species, Homo sapiens sapiens, who are always, it's not wanderlust. We're always looking to the next horizon. Okay. We're always looking to, and it's not poetic either. Like, I've talked about this before, the 7R gene, right? What's called the explorer gene. You can look up and read about this yourself. There are those of humanity that have that. And they are always going to keep leaping to the next horizon. And that next horizon is, will eventually be the stars. And that is just by the nature of these people, that have this explorer gene, in my opinion. So it's not a racist case at all. It is just a biological case where, I've argued in the past that I already think that there are multiple types of humans anyway. Like, just labeling everybody Homo sapiens sapiens, I think is a disservice and a flaw in medical science, or in science in general. I already think that there's a lot of different types. Not one is better than the other. No one is making that fucking case. That's where people run into trouble. Okay. When they start, tossing out these ridiculous ideas like, was it the RK selection theory or whatever, which are just, the pure asinine things that have nothing to do with humanity whatsoever. And things like RK selection theory, when applied to humans, suggests that one is better than the other. I would never, ever argue that one is better than the other. Are there differences? Yes, I would never argue one's better than the other. However, I do really I think that there are people who are, and I've written about this in newsletters, I've written about this in lots of things, and I've talked about it at some points on the show. There are people who are more empathic than others. And I think, or, that they have a greater capacity or a greater expression of empathy. And those people, and I've even coined the term Homo empathicus. I don't know if I'm the first person to do that, but I've brought that up. Is that a different breed of humanity? Is that some kind of subset or subspecies? Sure, maybe. I'm just putting that out there. But again, you read my lips. No one is better than the other. Like that's where people get tripped up. That's where we run into all kinds of trouble. And that's where we run into asshats who might have other podcasts that make these kinds of claims. Okay. So anyway, there are, and look, I'm the last person perhaps that should even talk about this stuff. I'm just basing it upon, what research I've done in the matter. And I don't talk about it much because I don't really necessarily feel that I'm qualified for this. So regardless, but I'm bringing it up. Okay. And you can take it how you find it and, do what you want with this info. But there are those, again, with the 7R gene that I think that those people are just, they're always looking at that next horizon. They're always having to explore, to go further. And it's not just like it's also not just like a physical exploration, like where they have to keep moving or something like that. It's an exploration of perhaps of culture, the human condition, and a lot of other things. I think it applies there as well. But regardless, that's what I mean, is that there are people within the human species that really do have to keep going and keep pushing the limits and all of this. I know I'm saying it's a biological, read up on it. It's an amazing, and something there's still a lot of research being done on, but please read up on it. And I think that's part of where I say that we're meant to be. We're naturally, I think we're a nomadic species naturally. And that's another thing too, where eventually you just keep moving. You keep moving on to the next graze. You keep moving on to whatever. And eventually that's going to be space. So that's why I feel confident with the biological basis of saying that humanity is meant to be a multi-planet species, because we're meant to keep going. So when put in conjunction with a lot of other things that humanity is quote unquote meant to do. Now, so that's one point. Okay, that's explaining what do you mean, Stallion, when you say humanity is meant to be a multiplanetary species. There's that. Then there's the other thing. Okay, while, Carl Sagan, a lot of other people want to make the argument that if something terrible happens on Earth, we need humans on another planet so that way they can survive. You don't need that, right? There's no real argument. There's no real, and morality's a spook. But there's no real, there's no real argument to be made that humanity has to survive. I'm not saying I don't want it to. I do. Okay. Just like I want to survive. I want to live forever. But there's no argument for saying that, there's no imperative. There's no, biological, maybe there's somewhat of a biological one, but there's no universal imperative that humanity has to go on forever, and that humanity has to survive. Not really. If you have a moral framework that you're coming at it with, a religious framework or some other kind of framework like that, okay, then you can invent reasons as to why humanity has to survive. And again, I'm not saying I don't want it to. I do want it to. Okay, but that's coming out of my own intrinsic, or maybe not intrinsic, but my own desires. That's coming out of me. That's not like there's something ethereal in the air that says humanity must live on. That's what I want to, when Carl Sagan or Hail Sagan, Satan bless him, and all these other people are saying, yeah, we have to make sure that humanity keeps going and all. Well, why? And there's no really great answer. We can say that it's just because, we want to. Okay, good. Then that's what you want to. But there's no, there's no moral, ethical imperative that says humanity has to live on. So you got to be careful when you say that, we need to do this to survive. We do need to do that to survive, but we don't need to survive, right? Just keeping that. I usually hate these kind of cliche sayings, but I'm just keeping it real. Okay. We can't genuinely explore we can't explore anything if we don't start from, if we don't start at the bottom, if we don't start at the foundation, at the core of, what life is and what life's all about. Again, I want to live forever, and there's people in my life, I want them living forever. Okay. Don't confuse what I'm saying here. I am not wanting humanity to go extinct or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I am just saying that, keep in mind, there's no actual reason for that humanity just has to fucking go on. No, it doesn't. We want it to, but no, it doesn't have to. So anyway, hopefully that explained, a couple points there. I still, I stand by the idea that the best place for us would be, either the prime asteroid belt, especially if there's some water in some of these things, or I would, Venus is probably my number one argument of where to have alternative, just to have human colonies, I guess. So anyway, speaking of health, I want to get into this, and then we do have a big subject that I want to get into, but got a couple of, these were also comments on, I think it was last week's, or a couple weeks ago's, the Zomia ONE Underground Q&A. And it was about the question of creatine that was asked. And I'm really glad. I'm glad that, again, people can live however they want. You can, if you want to do the Doritos on the couch thing, me, you get no judgment from me. Like it's all about your happiness, baby. And if that's what makes you happy, that's what makes you happy. I get a thrill out of fitness, out of working out, out of going to the gym and all this other stuff. And so I get excited when other people share that passion. Again, there's no judgment from me if you don't. And I mean, none, but it's cool that a lot of listeners, a lot of Zomia ONE Underground members, are really into this, and you've been asking a lot of questions and also sent some feedback on this. And the question that was asked a couple of Q&As ago was about, should I add in creatine? What's the benefits? Blah, blah, blah. And this person had a quote from Ben Greenfield, who I think is far more intelligent, or far more knowledgeable, shall I say, far more knowledgeable about health matters than even I. So let me read it here. Regarding creatine, Ben Greenfield, health, longevity, workout monster / nut job, said exactly the same as you, meaning me, the stallion, about creatine, with the small difference that you don't absorb more than 1.5 to 2 grams of creatine on a dose. He recommends keeping the creatine in the kitchen or whatever and just grab a gram or two when passing by, working up to about 5 to 6 grams a day. So anyway, so that's an interesting tack onto that. That I didn't know, that you can only absorb about 2 grams at a time. That does kind of fit in with where, my creatine consumption, I have split it up to where there's some that comes in my pre-workout drink, and then I add it to my post-workout shake. And I mean, I might break it up a little more now after understanding this, and I'm going to read the next comment here. On a more general supplement-related note, he had a pretty interesting article on naturally optimizing testosterone levels through workout, food, and supplementation. A search on his name and testosterone should get you where you need to go if interested. He actually, Ben Greenfield, so I'm not super familiar with him, but he had a great article. In fact, I linked to it in the show notes, all about what he takes as far as supplements and what he rocks with. I don't think that he had tribulus in there, which is one of the things that I take to enhance testosterone. Again, I don't like. There's a multitude of ways to go about this. With testosterone, if you're trying to naturally build that up, and there's a lot of reasons to do so if you're into fitness, especially. There's people who don't produce much, and so they really have to supplement it. Okay. And that's the more the extremes. I think that some of these articles would go to recommending on that. Not saying extremes is a bad thing. Okay. I naturally produce a lot of testosterone. And I have all of the physical, signs for that as well. So I don't go too crazy with how I boost my testosterone. Like I said, I take tribulus. In fact, I've up to not tribulus extreme, but like where it's almost 2,000 milligrams a day now that I boost up to with that with Tribulus. So, and that's some kind of legal limit or whatever. But that's largely what I do, other than anything that's added into, whatever workout powders that I happen to supplement with anyway. But Ben Greenfield, I put a link in the show notes. He has a great article on supplementation and what to do and why to take it and all that. I don't know that I would do everything he's talking about, but he does give a great argument. I mean, he talks about creatine in the article that I linked to, and he also makes a great argument for collagen, which I had removed for a little bit from my supplementation regimen. Which collagen protein, but it's a great thing. And I even know people who are vegetarians who, even though collagen is an animal byproduct or an animal product. Or even vegans who would take that anyway, just because the health benefits of collagen are just, they're too great. It's an easy thing to get you more protein, as well as a very specific type of protein that's great for your bones and joints, to add in. And I totally recommend doing that. And I need to get back into doing that again, because I'll admit, again, I hit the gym 6 to 7 days a week, or I should say 5 to 7 days a week. It depends upon the week and what I have going on. You hurt. This is the thing that a lot of bodybuilders and a lot of these guys won't tell you about. They love having that look and going for that look, but 8 to 10 times, that you ask them during the day, how you feeling, like their joints are hurting. They're really, especially when you're doing like legs and things like this. You're really you're kind of aching because you're constantly building up that muscle more and more and more. It just happens. And so taking things like collagen and other various supplementation can really help out with, getting rid of that, or, keeping that pain from being so terrible. But really, and there's guys who calm it down after a while. They'll get to a certain point with their workouts, and then they'll really, really calm it down and maybe go for a more functional strength than a look. Than having that monster look, because when you go for the more functional strength, you don't get the same size, but you end up getting to the point where you can, it doesn't hurt as much, right? Because it's functional, it's meant for action. Okay. But again, you won't have that like massive look. You might not have like the really like cut abs and things like this. But I really do feel like there's ways to mitigate that a bit. Okay. The function, or ways to do a hybrid where you can be more functional, but still go about, getting the monster size and all of this. So anyway, I'll be sure to link to that story in the show notes, where he talks all about supplementation that I thought was very well done. Again, I'm not sure I'm going to go as far as with a lot of things that he said, but there wasn't anything in there where I was like, that seemed kooky. I didn't really feel that way. So Ben Greenfield, very nice resource, and I appreciate the Zomia One listener mentioning him and bringing that up and talking about the creatine. So, and after I read what Ben Greenfield said about it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You can only absorb so much. So if you're going to take creatine, I would follow Ben Greenfield's advice on that. So anyway, let's shift gears here, and we're going to get into a subject about, it's a question that got asked a good while ago, very long, very, very long. I say that in a good way. A comment and a question and a thought process, and something to talk about in a story, actually. And I'll keep all the links will be in the show notes for this, about Cryptoanarchy, and that a patron wrote, and love this guy, and really appreciate what he put down. And I do want to cover this. I do want to talk about this because, well, Cryptoanarchy and a lot of these other things, I think these are terms that get bandied about a bit, that there isn't a whole lot of understanding around, that there needs to be some understanding around. And it's a term I haven't used much. Like I don't use Cryptoanarchy much. I suppose in by a lot of people's definitions, I would be labeled as such. And I don't really have a problem with the term, but there's conversations being had at events and things like this around that term and around that general movement that I think are worthy of discussion. And so did this patron. And so I want to talk about it. And again, at some point, this might end up getting tacked onto a Sovereign Tech episode, a public one. And we'll see how that goes. But let me read what this patron had to say. Now, there's a whole interview that he's talking about here between Frank Braun and Smuggler, who are both well, they give talks at various hacker conferences and things like this, as I understand it. But anyway, things that I've had occasion to be at and talk as well, but haven't done that in a good long while. I might get back into that, but you'd really have to convince me to get back into the whole like conference scene again, because, well, this will kind of speak to it. I mean, all right, let me read what he said, but bottom line, you'll get what I mean by that as we talk about this. And I'm not going to read the whole interview, but there's sections out of it that I think are certainly worth talking about. So anyway, here's what the patron had to say via Paul Rosenberg. Of course, Paul Rosenberg, for those that don't know who Paul Rosenberg is, I think he's tremendous. I believe he's Christian, which, whatever, I deal with it. But he's old school cypherpunk anarchist, and he wrote a book called The Lodge of Wayfaring Men. He had another book come out recently. I forget the name of it, but I love The Lodge of Wayfaring Men. Fantastic, fantastic novel that has a point. I mean, it's great, like anarchist fiction, technologically sound based anarchist fiction. So I really do reckon, if you've never checked out Paul Rosenberg's work, I mean, go do it. I can't recommend a guy enough. So anyway, I've met him as well, actually. In fact, I met him at the conference in Las Vegas, where was that the Bitcoin Investors Conference, which was one of the last places, ironically, talking about talking at conferences. It's like one of the last places where I presented at a conference, or where I talked at a conference. And Paul Rosenberg was there as well, actually. It's when the first chance I got to meet him, and we talked for a while, and that was a tremendous conversation. That was also the place where Craig Wright came out. Not that he said he was Satoshi at that point, of course, which is bullshit, fucking slap nuts, but whatever. It's where he kind of like came out and had an opening interview and stuff, and that's when people started talking, oh, he might be Satoshi or something like that, which is, of course, nonsense. But anyway, let us continue on. So with Paul Rosenberg, just a little history there. Via Paul Rosenberg's recent Freeman's Perspective newsletter, I keep rereading and pondering an interesting interview. Quote in the interview is why cryptoanarchy is not a revolutionary movement. Stanley breaking in, again, I will link to it in the show notes, which might be worth discussing on the show or elsewhere. And yes, patron, that's why we're discussing it here. And it said, hook me from the beginning as someone who can't stand sales and marketing, SV speak, and vapid, unprincipled celebritarians. Well, yeah, because this is obviously an interview with two people that aren't, vapid, for sure. So Smuggler, again, it's Smuggler and Frank Braun are the two people being interviewed, or that are talking here. Smuggler says, I gave the talk because he was giving a talk, I think at one of the events. Anyway, you can read about it in the interview. I gave the talk because I had the feeling that cryptoanarchy had become a brand, a word without meaning. That there's too little thought about the core ideas that make cryptoanarchy so interesting, end quote. It continues by validating, among other things, why revolutions are destructive, immoral, unnecessary, and why they achieve ends opposite of their intentions. I think it's good to be reminded how the ends never justify immoral means, regardless of how noble and desirable those ends might be. A topic discussed in the interview as a means for living free in an unfree world, I'm channeling Harry Brown here, parallel alternatives is something very much in line with topics Brian and others, of course, Brian, that being me, Brian and others have been discussing for years, such as intentional communities. Not mentioned in the interview, but something I've been noodling on for the last few years, I'm sure it's not a unique notion, is the realization that parallel alternatives need to exist not just for us to be a part of, but also separate alternatives for the bureaucratic, political, and violence-prone types. I'm being redundant here on purpose, which is right, bureaucratic, political, violence, it's all the same. It would be nice if these people are kept kept busy and deluded into believing they are doing something productive, while at the same time they are doing nothing to us, as in not harming us. I don't know what that parallel alternative would look like, but I think it's just as important as creating the parallel alternatives we would want to live in. I think it could be an important layer of defense against they, them, those. Now, there's a lot to talk about here, okay? And I pulled some selections from the interview. I totally recommend that you read the whole thing. It's not terribly long, but it does get into the concept of cryptoanarchy. And I want to get into some definitions around cryptoanarchy, but I want to address quickly the idea that the patron, who I consider a brilliant person, and very gracious to me as well, I want to talk about first his idea of, which I hope I'm understanding him correctly, of creating parallels for the people that want to do, that think that they're being helpful in the political system or whatever, but really they just end up not harming anyone. I'm kind of reminded of A.E. Van Vogt's, of course, one of the grand masters of science fiction, one of the greatest writers. I am such a fan, from Voyage of the Space Beagle to Slan to, there's so many great books out there. But speaking of Slan, A.E. Van Vogt in that talks about how, now you have to understand, these are things, a lot of the ideas that we talk about, a lot of the ideas that get talked about in libertarianism, in anarchism, and pick your flavor of anarchism and all this, there are certain threads that are common among subcultures. And I would dare argue that almost any ism becomes a subculture once it gets big enough anyway. And while you run into similar solutions in subcultures, you run into similar problems in subcultures. Okay. For example, pretty much, almost every subculture that isn't directed specifically, say, towards women, will often have a quote unquote problem. Okay, I put that in quotes because this might not be a problem. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Relax. You know, Stallion. I'm a feminist ally all the way. Relax. Okay. A lot of, and this has been going on in liberty circles and some anarchist circles, where are the women? How come there aren't any women here? Blah, 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 blah. Now, I would argue for some of those circles that I'm glad women aren't there because those women would be harassed endlessly. That's what I mean, that I'm glad that they're not there, because it would not be good for the women. But that comes up, that same argument comes up. How come there aren't more women Star Wars fans? How come there aren't more women, fans of this or into this or whatever? Okay. Or hell, even you could go to the Institute of General Semantics, a fine institution in my opinion. And, how come there aren't more women here and all this stuff, right? The thing is these are subcultures. Okay. And and I only bring up that example. Okay. Not to say that has to be the reality, but I bring it up to show that there are certain things that seem to become commonplace in a lot of subcultures. Okay. A lot of quote unquote problems, or, maybe the good things would end up being the same thing. Now, science fiction decades ago, I think there is a lot to learn from what science fiction fans went through literally, 70, however many years ago. Now, I say that that's important because you have to understand that science fiction writers and science fiction fans in the, 30s and 40s and so on were really trying to change the world. They considered themselves, you just look at the Futurians and others, they considered themselves a political movement in a very real way. A lot of them were communists, whatever. Okay. But they considered themselves, to be this. And a lot of them identified, this became a term, and go ahead and do Wikipedia and whatever and rock your shit. Okay. And look up about this if you need to. But there was A.E. Van Vogt wrote the book Slan, which is one of the first books to discuss the concept of mutants, way before the X-Men were a thing or anything like that. And in that, you have what are called, again, the mutants are called slans. And they are like these, there's different types of slans, but they are these people, these mutants, humans, that evolve, okay? And they have various mental abilities and greater strength and intelligence and blah, blah, blah. Now, science fiction fans at the time feeling very oppressed. And, let's be clear here. I could get into a whole side subject here. I really want to talk about this cryptoanarchy thing. All right, what the hell? I'm going to run with it. we'll just keep going. Science fiction fans felt very oppressed at the time, right? I mean, the whole, Revenge of the Nerds kind of thing, even in the 40s and 50s and, pick your decade. And in fact, I would argue that to this day, what's that guy's, there's a YouTuber, his name's like Eddie Butts, terribly unfortunate name, but he knows that. And he plays it up and I thought, we've been told, in fact, there's a lot of, shall we say, geek commentators, right? Even like Robert Meyer Burnett, who I think is a very nice guy. I think his heart is in the right place with a lot of things. I'm a bit of a fan, helped make Free Enterprise, the movie, one of my favorite movies ever. He talks about how we're like in a post-geek world or post-geek singularity where like everybody's actually a geek. Apparently not, because this guy, Eddie Butts, and I mean, I tweeted about it. You can, look into it if you want, was attacked for the fact that he started crying during his review. He got very emotional during his review of the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker. And he's getting picked on for this. And I just thought it was beautiful that he was so fucking excited about Star Wars. Good for you, baby. In fact, in a very real way, I miss feeling that kind of excitement over shit. I wish that kind of shit was out there right now where I would just like, and the only thing I can think of where I would like really, get into tears like that over like a trailer coming out would be like if Tron 3 was announced, I'd probably, break into tears and everything, but it's a goddamn beautiful thing for people to do that. So I wanted to say, well, because when I grew up in the 90s, I was a nerd. I was into Star Trek. I was into all the, Galactica. I was into Doctor Who before stupid Whovian shit ended up coming out, after 2005. I was, a Doctor Who fan when Doctor Who was Doctor Who, not this new horse shit. All right. Same with Galactica, and I mean, I was picked on just, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. Talk about crying. I was going home crying, not because I was happy, but because, it was so sad. And I really thought I was actually, for the past few years, I've kind of been thinking, no, we're past that. That doesn't happen anymore. No, the conservatives, the Trump supporters, the alt-right, all these, fuck nuts. They're back. And they're on Twitter, and they're picking on nerds and everything. But this is, that you can see it now. You can see the contemporary version of it. But this used to exist pre-Twitter and pre the internet and, pre-television being the powerful medium that it would become. This existed back in the days when books were the entertainment du jour. So, and at that time, after like Slan comes out, okay, and like into the 50s and all this, you have science fiction fans who start making these things called slan shacks, or they call them, they have the slogan that slans are fans, or fans are slans, whatever way they wanted to write it. Meaning that they identified with the oppressed mutants in A.E. Van Vogt's book, Slan. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert here. Okay. Spoiler alert. I can't help it. I have to, because to make my point, I have to tell you kind of what happens here. But as I always say, I could tell you what the fuck happens, but you still have to see it. And a book like Slan, you might as well know. You basically find out that slans are actually running everything. Okay. Like this mutant race who seems to be, this new breed of human that seems to be like very oppressed and everything is actually very much in charge and running the show. Okay. And the idea of building alternative systems where it can make it seem like, these people who engage in unethical, political actions and all this other stuff where they could feel like that they're actually doing something, but really they're actually very much being self-contained from harming anybody else. Not, as the patron said, not a new idea, not a bad idea either, and well, I don't know that it's okay. Yeah, I mean, it just overall speaks to the importance of parallel systems where people can practice shit their own way. And I don't know how you can really create that. Okay. I really don't know how you can create that. The best thing I think you can do is somehow, and I've said this so many times, like what is the dream technology that we could possibly have, right? Well, the dream technology we could have is force fields, where violence becomes instantaneously meaningless, and then people can do whatever they want over here, and they can't really harm anything that's going on over here. I don't know how exactly you make that happen, but anyway, it's an interesting idea, and it's an idea that Slants came to, right? Something like that. So I kind of get it. People have talked about this sort of thing as a way of of a group protecting themselves and stuff like this. But anyway, if I got that dead wrong, you tell me, because I'd love to talk about it. But I appreciate the patron for recognizing that, yeah, for years I've talked about we need to have parallel systems, parallel everything. And in this interview, they very much talk about that. So why don't we get into this interview, where they are talking about intentional communities and things like this. So there's a point where, okay, what is cryptoanarchy? Why don't we go ahead and define that a bit? One could go so far as to the Cyphernomicon by Timothy C. May from the early 90s, which is a tremendous read. I'm not saying I agree with it completely, because Timothy C. May basically says you're going to end up with assassination markets and you can't do anything about it. I don't think that is something we as a species, or as a, say, intentional community, which I would argue for, or that crypto anarchists might be going for, that's a thing, that has to be a thing, or that's by nature it's going to be a thing. I don't agree with that. Anyway, I'm going to read here from Smuggler. So let's see. The guy that's doing the interview, Tajana Adamoff, I'm pretty sure it's a guy. In your talk, and he says, in your talk and now, you mentioned non-attribution as being important. How would you define it, and do you think we'll be able to deal with it? And here's Smuggler talking. Non-attribution is the core concept of cryptoanarchy. It means that actions, data, objects, etc. cannot be attributed to a person by a third party. That is what the cryptography part of cryptoanarchy is primarily about. The moment actions cannot be attributed to a person anymore, the whole system of rulership by threat, judgment, and punishment breaks down. However, this also leads to problems because we do not know yet how to have justice and security without attribution. We rely on attribution because we've always had it and never had to think about what happens if we don't. I believe that many negative issues of non-attribution can be overcome while keeping the positive aspects. This requires work, ingenuity, and discovery. We'll have to figure it out by thought and experiment, but my hunch is that we will be able to deal with it well enough one day. So basically he's saying with non-attribution that cryptoanarchy should be, of course, it's being used for other things, but what Smuggler is saying is that it should be just, it's cryptography tacked on to anarchism and what comes out of that. Basically allowing people to act privately and have the freedom of not being concerned of being judged. Okay. Or that you ensure freedom through the fact that if there is some kind of ruling body out there that wants to punish you for an action, let's say particularly unjustly, they can't even discover that you're the one that did it, that did the thing. Or like if you didn't pay your taxes, they can't know that it wasn't you that didn't pay into, I don't know, whatever address it happens to be on blockchain. Now, cryptoanarchism it was a term that existed before blockchain, but certainly when blockchain came on the scene, when Bitcoin came on the scene and so on, people jumped on board with it. Now, I want to read a section here from Frank Braun, who is also being interviewed in this, and it's an interesting one. So the interviewer, Adamoff, says, how do you two, meaning Smuggler and Frank Braun, how do you two relate to the whole blockchain, smart contracts, and anti-banking ideas? And Frank Braun says, short answer, smart contracts are a dumb idea. Woo! Thank you. I feel like I'm the only guy that ever says that, and that has been saying that for years now. I really do. Very comforting to read this and have someone else, make that case. Anyway, long answer. Reading on with Frank Braun here, long answer, if you produce software that automatically rules over humans with the goal of efficiency, that's what smart contracts are. Thank you. Stallion saying that, thank you, because it's exactly what I've said. You are producing technological totalitarianism. There is no human anymore that could bend the rules, and there isn't even any authority to appeal to left. If your social score is too low to get on the airplane, then that's that. This is not a glorious technological future without intermediaries. It's dehumanizing technology in action. I think being anti-banking focuses too much on the wrong issues. Banks are not the major problem. Now, okay, let me read the next part here. Adamoff asks, wouldn't you say it's ironic that crypto-anarchist ideas seem totalitarian when at the same time their proponents claim to fight for liberty and freedom? Frank Braun says, I think the label crypto-anarchy has been watered down a lot in recent years because it became en vogue, in large parts due to the blockchain craze. In my view, crypto-anarchy was always about anarchy, as in no ruler, by the means of cryptography, most importantly, technologies that provide anonymity. Very important here are anonymous communication and payment methods, because these technologies strike at the root of the repression of what, in my view, are fundamental human rights, freedom of speech and freedom of transaction. Crypto-anarchy is about providing more freedom for the people that want it without interfering with the lives of others. Devising anonymized means to kill people for a good cause, assassination markets, is not crypto-anarchy. It is just plain evil. Using technological tools to start a revolution is not crypto-anarchy either. It is the imposition of a new method of rulership on a ruled population. Revolutions, with the help of technology or not, have two big problems. The new ruling class coming into power after a revolution is usually worse than the one it replaces. It seems to be impossible, and I agree with that over and over again. But I mean, look at where America has gotten compared. Seriously, be honest. Look, I mean, is King George as bad a guy as Donald Trump? No, not even close. So, yeah, I mean, or, look at what happened in Russia, when the Soviets took over. I mean, that became brutal by comparison to the czars. Now, I'm not arguing that one government was better than the other. I'm just saying, if we're going to look at raw metrics, holy shit. Yes, it does appear that history teaches the lesson that what comes after the revolution is worse than what was before. So, I mean, and is that true all the time? Of course not. I'm sure we could come up with a lot of different examples, especially of like little countries where for a couple of years they tried out something else. And that's the nature of, well, this is why I don't argue for revolutions, right? Certainly not physical ones. Mental ones, I suppose that's a little bit of a different story. But anyway, it's beautiful to read this because this reads very much like things I've been saying on Sovereign Tech for 7 years. But let me keep on reading here a little bit more. So revolutions with the help of technology or not have two big problems. The new ruling class coming into power after a revolution is usually worse than the one it replaces. It seems to be impossible to create a better system when you start with ethical dubious means. A revolution implies that again, a revolution is ethically dubious. And even more importantly, what if the revolutionized population doesn't want to be revolutionized? Who gives you the right to change their system of rulership by force? Crypto-anarchy is about creating a parallel alternative which does not destroy the surrounding power structure and tries to live in harmony with it. There are many successful historic examples of this: ethnic minorities with their own communities, legal structures, business frameworks, etc. Crypto-anarchy simply brings this concept into the technological and virtual sphere, although it also has a big physical aspect to it. Of course, if crypto-anarchy would spread wide and far, this would have secondary consequences on the surrounding structures, as every major technology shift has. But it doesn't force anything on anyone. However, the point that they're bringing up, is Stanley breaking in, is that, well, crypto anarchists are kind of forcing their way onto people by like unleashing, like with smart contracts, unleashing, shall we say, assassination, blah, blah, blah. I don't even like this. I don't even like the word. I don't even want to say it. Assassination markets, and go down the list. When they do this, when they bring these things into fore and they don't give a rat shit that sort of thing exists, yeah, I mean, in some ways, you are forcing your perspective onto other people when when you're delivering that more en masse, in some ways. So anyway, I'm going to talk more about the parallels, but I want to hit on this. In fact, this is getting into the parallel conversation. This is from Smuggler, where he's talking about how you want to create entire parallel systems that avoid, and how, well, crypto anarchy, again, allowing for that anonymity, and Frank Braun was kind of hitting at that, where that mindset of cryptoanarchy can, while it anonymizes what you do virtually and digitally, that can seep into the meat space, right? Into meat space, into the physical world, where suddenly, oh, that's how you want things to operate in real life as well. Interesting thought. But here, let me read this from Smuggler. Spaces like these, meaning these parallel communities that they want to set up, that through the use of cryptoanarchy and so on. Spaces like these allow us to experiment with new ideas in a safe and isolated environment. For example, we don't really know how anonymity in the physical, which I was just talking about in meat space, really works, how methods would look like that could still provide security and conflict resolution, or how to organize without a hierarchy of leadership and coercion, no central budget, and not even have attribution as a tool for that. Experimenting with those things before exposing an unwilling society to it is necessary, because sometimes experiments go wrong and our ideas are simply not shared by a majority. So we try to practice respect for the will of others, even if we don't agree. And well said. Now, the point that they're making there is that we need to experiment in our own little places, wherever that happens to be, online, offline, whatever, or, a hybrid, with these concepts. And how does that work with a certain amount of society? Now, this is not a new idea in and of itself. Okay. In the Roman Empire, there were emperors, okay, that tried to set up like these little island cities where they could try out different, like philosophically different types of governance. Okay. Very well known. Plato had his hand in some of this stuff, as well as other philosophers of their day, and it wasn't just tried once. I mean, and there have been attempts at this. These intentional communities, sometimes even being ordered again by the Emperor of Rome himself, to try out a different type of living and to experiment with that before you just implement it on the whole fucking planet. And basically, anything you implement in the United States is going to affect the entire planet. And that's good or bad, okay? That's just the reality of the situation. When you could do that, like before you affect everybody, you just try it out over here. And we're not doing that. No one's doing that. No one's willing to really give that a shot. And here's the thing, is that I have been arguing, okay, I dig what Smuggler's talking about. And they talk about other concepts, right? Not just cryptoanarchy, but like Second Realm. I think I've talked about Second Realm in the past on the show, and that's the same idea, where you just create a system that sits on top of or to the side of, the governance and banking system and everything else that we have right now. Okay, it's a fine idea. I get it, and I'm not unsupportive. I mean, I might not agree with everything that gets written down in these manifestos, be it Second Realm or, the Cyphernomicon or whatever. Okay. But, the basic abstract, yeah, you're onto something there with that. So I'm very much on board, again, with creating these parallel societies, shall we say. And I've been espousing them for a long time, intentional communities and otherwise. But I'll tell you, okay, and there's a lot to discuss there, and I think there's a lot of food for thought with crypto-anarchism and everything. Here's the rub. Here's the thing with this. And I haven't talked about on Sovereign Tech, I haven't talked about intentional communities in a really long time. And you want to know why? Don't think I sound defeatist in this, because I don't feel defeated. But, I guess in some way I do, but not really. You can't get people off of Facebook. It doesn't fucking matter what Facebook does. I think, and I know I've said this before, and I hate to use such an extreme, but I'm serious. I think Facebook could literally reenact Hiroshima and Nagasaki on some other country, and people would still stay on Facebook. I am baffled beyond belief, baffled that people still use that fucking thing, no matter what they do. Holy shit, they're coming out with a voice assistant now. Okay, like even if you're on Instagram or whatever, you can't get people off of Facebook, and the case is open and shut. Years ago, when we found out that they were engaging in behavioral experiments, that should have been enough. What, you think they stopped? Do you really? Email me, or hit me up on Twitter. I don't care. Whatever it takes for you to do. I want you to get in touch with me, okay? And I want you to tell me that you think Facebook stopped engaging in behavioral experiments. If you think that, I mean, wow, do I feel so bad for you? You can't get people to leave that damn thing. You just can't. And, the idea that, I mean, look, I can tell you, okay, yeah, how do we engage in Cryptoanarchy? Fine idea. How do we engage in this? Okay, so, we're going to get people using Cubes OS or Tails, as their operating system on their computers. They're not going to carry around their smartphones, or if they are, they're going to rip out, they're going to run drills through just about every sensor that they can find on that goddamn thing. Okay, you're going to rock some UB keys. Okay. That's how you're going to log in. We're going to get to a post-password society here. People are going to be using, riot.im. That's a fine option if you don't want to use Signal. I know what happened with Riot recently and that Matrix server. I know. But you get my point. Okay. We're going to rock that. That's how you're going to be sharing photos. That's how you're going to be doing this. You're going to get this notion of the importance in finding validation in your life by engaging with completely random people on social media. That's going to go the way of the dodo. We could talk about all this stuff, okay, that people can do, and they can do it right now. You can have that parallel community right this fucking second. You can implement the things that would allow for you to have these anonymous transactions right this fucking second. In my personal opinion, there is no good reason why you can't have a parallel community that almost completely disappears from the eyes of governments around the world. I'm serious. I mean, maybe people have to be educated in how to, do certain things, in life. But you could really, really have that right now. And how many people that are supposedly principled are going to take that on right this second? Or people that wave that crypto anarchist flag? None. Or at least very few. Not enough for even really to do any kind of social experiment. So, I love these ideas. I am on board with these ideas. I support and espouse these ideas. But in 7 years, and, one of the reasons I was excited to get sovereign tech going and everything was that cryptocurrencies finally brought in, it was, in many ways, it was the final answer, okay, it was the last piece of the puzzle. All right, how can we create a parallel anarchist intentional community? How can we make this happen? One of the most important parts was having, for most people, and I'm not saying you don't have to do this, because if you want to do it, communist or socialist style, that's a different argument entirely. Okay, but money. You had to have independent money that people recognize as value, and that somehow backed itself up. And that's what blockchain allowed for, right? Because you didn't need to, it doesn't need force to back it up. It just needs the blockchain. It just needs that distributed ledger to back up the value of that money. Okay, and to back up the transactions. No force required. That was it. 7 years later, actually Bitcoin's 10 years old now, but 7 years later, no matter how much I've hammered it, no matter how much I've talked about it, no matter how many times I've laid it out, it's not happening. I know there's some people that are kind of trying. They're sort of maybe getting there. And maybe I just have to accept that it's going to be done on a slower pace at an incremental, with incremental steps or something. Okay. But God damn it. And even just doing a simple thing like delete your Facebook account, because you're not going to have Cryptoanarchy if you have a Facebook account. It's like the people like Wanda Sykes. I remember when I saw Wanda Sykes on stage and she's saying, you can't have #MeToo and The Bachelor at the same time, the TV show. Okay. You can't have Cryptoanarchy and Facebook at the same time. I dare say you can't have Cryptoanarchy really and even have Twitter. I mean, it's a little, you can at least run well, anyway, I'm not going to get into all that, but you get my point. So, I'm not like depressed about it. I'm just saying that like these ideas are wonderful. They're beautiful, but and if you want to try all these parallel societal experiments, fuck yes, do it. Go for it. Second realm that shit all the way. I am so supportive of you. Please. Okay. And, there are plenty of ways, and I have offered plenty of ways, all the encrypted ways. I know my shit. I'm a cryptographer. Okay. Where you could get in touch with me and you could tell me that you're out there and that it exists and that you're trying it. You've got, we've got 200 people, or I don't know, hell, you got 20. We've got 20 people, and we've built the TAS, and we're making this happen, right? Temporary autonomous zone, like Hakeem Bey talked about, and that I've been talking about forever. There's plenty of ways that people get in touch with me, and tell me, and where they don't have to like really reveal themselves and to let me know and to give me hope that it's happening. Nope. And you could say that's the nature of doing it right. Yeah, maybe. But if anything, tell me, and I can at least not have to go on this street. So I don't know, maybe it just takes time. Maybe people will still jump on it. Maybe more people. I mean, it's true. Only 1% of the world's population even like has any kind of cryptocurrency, right? So maybe it's just going to take another 10 years for people to realize, because I've seen it. I've been at the meetups, at the conferences, where you're talking to the guy and a guy says, it's like, wow, I started using Bitcoin, and you know what I thought to myself? I said, why do we need banks? Why do we need a Federal Reserve? Yeah. And like, it just, when the technology shows them these things aren't necessary, it clicks in their head that, holy shit, these things aren't necessary. And, maybe it's just going to take more time for that to kind of happen. And if so, then there are people such as Smuggler, such as Frank Braun, such as, I guess, myself, the patron gave me that credit. I don't need to say it for myself, that have been laying out the ideas, and they can take them and they can run with them themselves. And if you do, fucking awesome. Good for you. And I will continue to espouse it, because you don't want to just complain. You have to have solutions. Well, we know the solutions. Okay. And I guess even if people don't do it, don't engage in the solutions, then, at least they can't lob at us the thing, well, all you do is complain and you never have any alternatives. Oh, no. Oh, I've got alternatives. I've got more alternatives than, you can shake a stick at. But people gotta, they gotta live up their principles. They've got to they have to act out. They have to act upon their principles. And maybe if I just keep saying it enough, maybe one day some people will. I mean, all right. Again, I don't mean it to sound like a downer, because I have met some people who absolutely, even the very simple things, they do. They will delete their Facebook account. They will use Firefox. They will use Signal. They will, start using all these things and run away from the, aspects that say wouldn't fit into, what some people would call cryptoanarchy or something. I just call it personal freedom, but, whatever term they want to toss around. Okay. So there are some, so it does happen. It's just, it's not like at a scale, especially when I have thousands of listeners, and like I make it available for these people to reach out to me, or to let me know that they exist, or I could even see if they like sign up, and they never do, but, read this interview. It's really great. It's still, intentional communities and parallel systems, parallel societies, whatever you want to call it, parallel cultures, it's still the answer. It always will be, and it's been known for a long time. Like I said, it's not even, that new of an idea. Just now we have technology has provided a lot of ways for, I would argue that it allows for a better chance of those parallel communities to exist and thrive, because they can hide effectively from, the rest of the civilized world. And that's really what it needs to do to be able to even try to experiment. And I agree. No one has all the answers, and, you're going to see spontaneous order. You're going to see all these crazy things happen as these people do experiment. Like where are the where's the seasteading? Where is it really? How old's that fucking idea? And it hasn't happened yet? Not really? Come on. Hell, I want to see that happen, though. I even have concerns around that. because, oh man, you know who did seasteading? You know who basically did that? And who basically like has had some degree of success with creating like parallel communities? I'm terrified that this is a fact. L. Ron Hubbard. That's terrifying. And he did that through the auspices of religion. He did not appeal to reason whatsoever. And that's really scary, is that maybe the only way you can make this sort of stuff happen is if you're appealing to, pure nonsense. So anyway, I don't mean to be so depressing about it. These are beautiful ideas, and I agree with much of, not all, but much of what Smuggler and Frank Braun were talking about there. I totally recommend reading that. But, and these intentional communities need to be a thing. And I've had some people even recently reach out to me about, so I have this idea, that's like leading towards creating an alternative system of some kind. And I'm glad, I love the fact that people are doing that. And at some point, when I have time, like I want to respond and I want to say, yeah, what do you got? Let's talk about this. Let's do this. Okay. And they're smart. And they say like, how can I talk to you in a more encrypted fashion, when they just email me, and yeah, I'm happy to have those conversations and see what I can do. But anyway, yeah, I don't mean to be a downer on this. It's just fuck, I mean, it's not even a question of people are, describing cryptoanarchy wrong or things like this. It's like, you can't even get people to do the simple things, the little things that they could do to have so much more privacy and anonymity and freedom in their life, like deleting Facebook. Well, anyway, that's enough of that. Why don't I go ahead? You know what? I'm going to skip the album of the week because this went long enough. All right, tell you what. All right, no, I'll tell you the album of the week. How about we do that? I'll tell you the album of the week, and then we'll kind of go from, and because I'm not going to get into a big review. But LA Guns, of course, LA Guns is a band that outcropped out of members that were originally, what was that, Hollywood Rose, right? Which would turn into Guns N' Roses, but then also turn into LA Guns. Classic rock history. Maybe sometime I'll cover it on the Hard and Fast podcast. LA Guns, they came out with a new album last month, I think it was, The Devil You Know. And it's a pretty good rocking album. Actually, one of the best LA Guns albums I've heard probably in like 15 years. I mean, I thought it was really solid. So if you want to check out, if you're into Tracy Guns, you want to check out some classic shit, hit up LA Guns, The Devil You Know. I'll just drop that out there. No need to like talk about all the songs or anything. If you like LA Guns sound, you're going to love this. So, which by the way, we're supposed to be getting some new Guns N' Roses soon. I know I heard Duff McKagan has a solo album coming out that he's doing with Shooter Jennings and everything, but that's all stuff I'll talk about on the Hard and Fast podcast. Anyway, thank you so much for being a patron of Zomia One, for being a member of the Zomia One Underground, which I suppose in its own way is a little bit of a parallel society anyway, but or a parallel community in its own fashion, though not encrypted, but just put behind a paywall. But anyway, yeah, I think there's a lot more to say on this. Again, please do read that interview that I linked to in the show notes. I appreciate the patron bringing it up. And I appreciate them understanding that, these are the real solutions, and also creating that other like parallel community where the people that the busybodies, right, where they can think that they're doing something productive while leaving the rest of us alone, having something like that. Yeah. That's something that needs to be explored too. So anyway, that's it for your Zomia One Underground Q&A. We'll see if we lose anybody over this one. I will see all of you on the other side.